is keep learning uh, and have a growth mindset. Uh, get inspired by other disciplines of design. So you mentioned uh, a few episodes back, you were talking to a tattoo artist. Uh, Imagine what a tattoo artist can learn from a weaver, what a weaver can learn from a tattoo artist, and what they can teach the people who are designing, I don't know, the astronaut suits for SpaceX. Uh, so it's all about like uh, appreciating the other disciplines of design and really being curious about what's going on over there, and trying to connect the dots and borrow things from there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time in every unique discipline of design. So I'll say be curious, learn more, observe more.
Presenting you Anshuman Kumar on our turn podcast series. Yeah, absolutely. So recently we actually interviewed one more person, which was Khalif Greenier. He is an head of service design at Royal College of Arts. So he's actually heading service design, which is actually a new concept which has been introduced, wherein people actually solve the question keeping the person or the audience in the core, and then actually designing everything around it. So that's something which I could see UX getting into after a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, service design has been there for some time. It has been there for easily like 15 years, 20 years that I am aware of. It has been more popular in the academic circles. There have been some agencies in Europe and US and some in India who have tried to bring the concepts or the methodology of service design. And but yeah, at its core, it's all about like identifying all the touch points with the customer and thinking of that experience holistically, is what at its core service design is, and at its best, user experience is service design.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, if I could just break down all of this conversation into us into one or two lines, we can just see that the surface is actually about if we are actually designing a car. So, firstly, we actually just design the engine and the machinery related to, so we can just get it rolling on. Then after that, we actually add customizations like how this should look. Then we actually look about how aesthetically it should look, and then we actually holistically go like how it should actually feel when a person actually sits into it. So that's how we can actually break it down for our audience to get to know that how actually user experience work. So with that, I would like to ask you. So you had actually mentioned about VR and also autonomous vehicle project which you have done. So could you just tell me any one of the project which you actually loved?
Oh, there are many. Let's see. Given you're talking about car, I can talk about the self-driving car project that Google had. I joined that project as a 20% designer, but I started spending a lot of time on that project. And uh, the story over there is, which is like a life lesson for me, is and this is happening in 2015, and the self-driving car project has still been going on for like 3 years within Google, or maybe a little more. And when I joined the team, I realized that how challenging that problem was. It's easy to imagine, just say, oh, cars will drive by themselves. Uh, and that's where, like, from a user experience point of view, safety becomes very important. Reliability becomes very important. Trust becomes very important. As a person sitting in the car, do I trust this car to drive me safe? As a person sitting in the car, can I how do I know that I'm going to be safe? So there are different aspects of user experience that emerge as you go into new disciplines. So The one thing that kind of really stood out for me, and I learned it from a PM who used to run that project, was how to solve seemingly impossible problems. So, making a car that drives itself on the road with people, animals, cycles, cars, and taxis and buses, and next to each other, coexisting, uh, understanding signals, understanding people's intent, because people don't always do what they were supposed to do on road, is a very challenging job. So, uh, the what I learned from this PM was, for any seemingly challenging problem, if the first thing is to kind of dissect that big problem into smaller subproblems, and the moment you kind of break the larger problem into smaller subproblems, you realize that 70% or 80% of the problem is actually solvable. It has already been solved, or there's are existing solutions in other industries that can be adopted for this particular problem. It's only the remaining 20% which has not been solved yet. And that is making this whole thing challenging or seemingly impossible. And his approach was, or maybe I'll say the whole self driving cars team approach was, let's find that person in the world who believes that this problem can be solved. And let's not just find one, but we find a few more people who believe that remaining 20% is a solvable problem, bring them together and give them the time, space, and resources to go ahead and solve that problem. Trust them that they can solve this problem, and then make the other part of the team focus on the remaining 80% of the problem to kind of to do that thing right. And that just kind of switched a like light bulb in my mind, where suddenly everything seems possible. And when you look what SpaceX is doing, it's like, wait, how is that possible? How can they do it in 5 years when NASA couldn't do it in I don't know, 50 years or more? I think it's that mindset of very analytical mindset of looking at a problem, not getting even however daunting it might look, not getting intimidated by that, but looking at it from a very rational perspective, breaking it down, and believing people who believe who could solve that problem.
So yeah, he actually told the ideology, which I could just summarize in one sentence, which would be like, when crazy people come together who think that nothing is impossible, impossible turns out to be seemingly simple.
I won't say crazy, I'll say optimistic.
Yeah, obviously.
People who believe things can be done. And they might seem crazy, but they might be the most smartest people you might have come across.
Yeah, so actually meant by crazy is that when people in this background, they actually need to have an thinking which is out of the box, and wherein they actually discover things which a normal person wouldn't even discover. So that's why I actually termed it as crazy.
Yes.
So with that, I would like to ask you. So do you have any inspiration? So when we are actually designing anything, do you have any inspiration, or how you actually go to design anything?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I generally don't have like a go-to source for inspiration. Inspiration many a times is around us. But if I really squint my eyes, I feel the aspects of architecture that still inspire me. So it ranges from the work of Tadao Ando or Sahadi no more, to some of the more emerging architects. And uh, I still look for inspiration in architecture. I look for inspiration in other disciplines of design. Uh, for example, a lot of work that happens on product design, industrial design, how sustainability has become a big part of that discipline. How can we learn from that discipline? How can we inspire the work we do on UX design through what the other disciplines are prioritizing in the way they think about designing products? So I think the inspiration is from other disciplines of design which are more mature, and how we can bring those inspirations back to the work that we do.
So as you're actually an architecture, so in your off day, right now when you're actually having an off day, do you actually go and see to what's new in architecture and what's actually going on in architecture?
Yeah, I'm very interested in what's going on, where we are pushing the boundaries of architecture, and my personal area of interest is how we are making architecture more sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and uh, and that's a big like that's a big mission for this earth. And if we and architecture, I feel, has gone through significant rounds of evolution, even the last, like I'll say, 15 years, 20 years, uh, to actually start marching towards that mission. And if you remember, previously in my conversation, I mentioned I used to work my summers in IDC, and the professor I used to work was uh, it was his area of research was solar passive architecture. So I think that interest kind of is rooted over there, and I love and enjoy seeing how that philosophy is evolving in some of the work that's happening now these days.
That's wonderful. And yeah, actually, sustainability is actually going to be the future of architecture. So, what do you think is the future of design?
Oh wow, that's that's a loaded question. Uh, I have I've thought about this question and many a times, and the way I have internalized it for myself is we what we're looking. If you just step away from everything that's happening in the last 40 years and just look at this, how technology has evolved from a bird's eye perspective, the way I look at it is that we are looking at a journey of humans and computers, and it's the distance between them that's reducing. So if you look back at, I don't know, 30 years, 35, 40 years, if you had to use a computer, you had to go to a particular building in the city, in a particular city. You go to a particular room, and that room was the computer. And so you had to travel miles or kilometers or hundreds or thousands of kilometers to access the computer. uh, 20, 25 years back, those computers became smaller and became PCs, and then now they could be sitting in your office desk or your home desk. So you have to now just drive or walk a few kilometers or few meters. And then the computers came even closer, they became laptops. So the way their form factor has been shrinking, they have been becoming more and more closer to humans. So with laptops, you can carry them around. You don't need to go to a particular room. You can be sitting anywhere, open your laptop and work. That laptop became phone. You don't need to carry your bag now. Your computer's in your pocket wherever you go. And now the computer is sitting on your wrist as your watch. And in a few years, it'll be on your face as your smart glasses. And in a few years, it'll be inside you. It already is. Uh, and for me, as an interaction designer, I'm always looking at the interaction between computers and humans, how we understand each other, and how we communicate with each other. So when communication is input and output, so I don't know if you've seen neural links, recent experiments where they are using neural link chips within. They were actually testing with the monkey. They planted the chip in the monkey's, I don't know which part of the brain, but uh, the monkey can actually think of what they want to do, and they made monkey play a game. I think it was a game of pong, and after some time with some training, the monkey could play the game just by thinking of what he or that monkey wanted to do. And that was like for me, a very pivotal moment in how this journey between computer and machine and humans are shrinking. And uh, it's like a little more dystopian future, maybe I'm trying to paint. But yeah, the future of design, I feel, is very, very immersive, uh, where input will become, we might not need a mouse, we might not need a physical device. It's just thinking or intent or your eyes or multiple other things where we'll be able to easily interact with machines. You might not need a screen because the screen is in front of you, in front of your glasses. So in terms of hardware, either display or interaction, uh, the form factors of these tech will reduce. They will be more closer to us. In terms of just the whole experience of different product experiences on these devices, uh, I think that's where we'll start seeing more immersive experiences, which goes beyond just your utility and delight, but it's more like immersion. And that's where I'm very fascinated to see how AR shapes up or VR shapes up. Uh, that I'm saying this not to discount that there will still be phones, there will still be apps, there will be a coexistence of these products. And on the more traditional form factors, I feel design is going to become, as a designer, it will become more intelligent, it will become more automated. So, what will happen is we will remove the busy work of designing and we'll create more time for designers to be more creative. And if you look at in the last even 1.5 years, actually that's one of the advantage of COVID. Our design tools have improved significantly. They have become so much more collaborative, and I feel that that this development will continue happening. So our tools will become much more smarter. We'll reduce the busy work, and we'll be able to kind of focus our time on more creative and sensorial designs, and that's very exciting as a designer.
Absolutely, that sounds to be a golden era for designers, I must say. This coming 10 or 15 years will be a golden era for design in India, absolutely, because it's actually emerging in India right now only. So, with that, I would actually like to ask you a personal question right now, which we haven't actually discussed. But yeah, so as you actually mentioned that this technology has been over for 40 years only, and when we actually look at the generation gap between me and my father or my grandparents, it gets very hard for them to actually cope up with this technology. So how does UX design actually help to incorporate them into learning this technology seamlessly?
That's a great question, and that's where the utility part becomes very important. Where are we building this experience that is accessible? And when I say accessible, I mean accessible in the its widest meaning. Where uh, can my father, whose eyesight is not like perfect, can they still use it? Can they even understand those mental models of these devices to actually navigate it? Uh, how do they understand the app structure, so that when they're using the phone, they know how to minimize the app, when to bring it up, how to switch between apps, how to delete the app. So all those are like new and evolving mental models. And I'll say it's a very difficult job because as designers, we are taught to kind of solve, like imagine a user and their needs and solve for them. And when we are designing for the whole world, it's a daunting problem because people are so different. The way you use a product will be so different from your parents. So I think that problem aspect of design has not been very well solved just yet. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel right now the burden has been borne by like the generation of our parents or our grandparents, where they have taken the extra effort to learn this, or our generation has taken the extra effort to teach them how to use it. But I think that's a huge need where technology can by itself reform or reshape itself to become usable for different kind of people or accessible to different kind of people who might not be well versed with technology by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. This can be an area which has not been touched yet, because design has actually evolved over a quick 2 decades only. So it didn't, as you mentioned before, it didn't get time to actually mature enough to actually contemplate every of your users in it. So
Yeah.
with that, I would like to ask you the last question for today, which is, could you just give our audience some insights and also any takeaways from this conversation?
Uh, I think the one thing that your audience is very wide, and the one thing that I would probably sum up is keep learning uh, and have a growth mindset. Uh, get inspired by other disciplines of design. So you mentioned uh, a few episodes back, you were talking to a tattoo artist. Uh, Imagine what a tattoo artist can learn from a weaver, what a weaver can learn from a tattoo artist, and what they can teach the people who are designing, I don't know, the astronaut suits for SpaceX. Uh, so it's all about like appreciating the other disciplines of design and really being curious about what's going on over there, and trying to connect the dots and borrow things from there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel every time in every unique discipline of design. So I'll say be curious, learn more, observe more.
Thanks a lot. It has been actually my pleasure hosting you on this show, and thanks a lot for giving us your time and coming on our show.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a pleasure talking to you.
Till the end. I really hope you liked our show. If you did, please leave us a review on YouTube comment box. And by the way, if you had any question which came up because of the content we covered with our guest, go on YouTube, go on Instagram, and you can leave us a comment. We will surely get back to you and help you as much as possible. Arttown.store, that's the website name, and our Instagram ID too. Find us and talk to us. We are waiting to converse with you.